Psalm 4. Peace covers your night, God guards your rest. Peace covers your night, God guards your rest. Psalm 4 is one of the most intimate prayers in the entire book of Psalms. It is not a song written for public celebration or collective triumph, but a quiet dialogue between the human soul and God at the end of the day. It speaks to the moment when noise fades, when distractions dissolve, and when the heart is finally alone with its thoughts. In this sacred space, fear often rises, anxiety speaks louder, regret revisits, and yet Psalm 4 declares something radically different. Peace is not something you must create, earn, or control. Peace is something God gives, and He gives it precisely when the world is silent and the night is long. The psalmist does not deny distress. He does not pretend life is easy or safe. Instead, he acknowledges pressure, opposition, misunderstanding, and inner turmoil. But rather than allowing those forces to dominate the night, he entrusts his rest to God. This is the central revelation of Psalm 4. True rest is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of God, guarding your inner life while you sleep. In a world driven by urgency, stimulation, and endless mental activity, rest has become fragile. Many lie down exhausted yet unable to sleep. The body is still, but the mind races. The heart is heavy. The soul is unsettled. Psalm 4 speaks directly to this modern condition, offering an ancient but living truth. When your trust is placed in God, the night loses its power to torment you. This psalm teaches that peace is not merely emotional calm, it is spiritual security. It is the confidence that even when circumstances remain unresolved, God is active, attentive, and near. To rest in peace is not weakness. It is an act of deep faith. It is choosing to believe that God works not only in the daylight of action, but also in the darkness of surrender. What follows is a deep, contemplative journey through Psalm 4. Each topic explores a different dimension of divine peace, inner security, and spiritual rest. This is not a surface-level reflection, but a slow and immersive meditation designed to quiet the soul, renew trust, and restore the sacred act of sleeping in peace under God's watchful care. Calling on God in the night. When the soul speaks and God answers, night has always been a powerful spiritual threshold. It is the time when distractions fade and the heart becomes audible to itself. In Psalm 4, the psalmist begins not with triumph, but with a plea. Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God. This opening line reveals something essential about the spiritual life. The night often exposes what the day allows us to hide. During daylight, activity can mask fear, productivity can silence grief, conversation can postpone confrontation with the self. But when night arrives, the soul speaks freely. Thoughts surface that were suppressed, worries return without invitation. The psalmist understands this reality and does not run from it. Instead, he directs the raw honesty of the night toward God. Calling on God in the night is not a sign of spiritual failure. It is a sign of spiritual maturity. It acknowledges that human strength has limits and that control is an illusion. When the psalmist cries out, he is not demanding comfort on his terms. He is seeking reassurance rooted in God's character. He appeals to God's righteousness, not his own worthiness. This distinction is crucial. Many people struggle at night because they try to justify themselves before resting. They replay the day, measure their performance, rehearse mistakes, and fear consequences. Psalm 4 interrupts this cycle by shifting the focus away from self-evaluation and toward divine faithfulness. The psalmist does not say, "Answer me because I did everything right." He says, "Answer me because you are righteous." This is the first foundation of peaceful rest, understanding that God's response is based on who He is, not on how perfect you were today. Night becomes unbearable when rest depends on self-approval. But when rest is anchored in God's righteousness, peace becomes possible even after a difficult or imperfect day. The psalmist continues by remembering past deliverance. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me, and hear my prayer. This remembrance is not nostalgia, it is spiritual grounding. The soul finds stability by recalling moments when God has already intervened. Memory becomes an anchor. Fear loses authority when history testifies that God has been faithful before. Calling on God in the night also reorders power. Anxiety often feels overwhelming because it speaks in absolutes. This will never change. You will fail. You are alone. Prayer interrupts this false authority. By calling on God, the psalmist places his fear in a smaller frame. He does not deny distress, but he refuses to let distress define reality. There is also humility in this nighttime prayer. The psalmist asks for mercy. He does not approach God with entitlement. Mercy implies dependence. It acknowledges vulnerability. This posture is essential for peace because pride keeps the nervous system alert, while humility allows the soul to rest. When you accept that you cannot carry everything, your spirit begins to exhale. Another powerful dimension of this calling is intimacy. Night prayer is often quieter, less performative, more sincere. There is no audience, no need for polished language. The psalmist speaks plainly. This honesty deepens the relationship between the soul and God. Peace grows not from religious effort, but from relational trust. The act of calling on God also transforms solitude. Night can feel lonely, especially when burdens are heavy. Prayer turns solitude into companionship. Even when God feels silent, the act of speaking establishes connection. The soul remembers it is not abandoned. This awareness alone can soften anxiety enough for rest to begin. Importantly, Psalm 4 does not suggest that calling on God will instantly erase all problems. The psalmist still lives in a world of conflict and misunderstanding. But peace is not portrayed as the elimination of struggle. It is portrayed as the presence of God within it. The night becomes less threatening because it is no longer faced alone. Calling on God in the night also disciplines the mind. Instead of allowing thoughts to spiral unchecked, prayer gives them direction. Fear becomes language, confusion becomes petition, restlessness becomes surrender. This redirection is not suppression, it is alignment. The mind aligns itself with trust rather than threat. Over time, this practice reshapes the soul's relationship with night itself. Instead of associating darkness with fear, the soul begins to associate it with encounter. The bed becomes an altar, silence becomes sacred, sleep becomes an act of faith. This transformation does not happen overnight, but Psalm 4 shows that it begins with a simple, honest call. To call on God in the night is to admit that you are not self-sufficient, and that is precisely what makes peace possible. The soul was never designed to guard itself alone. It was designed to rest under divine care. Psalm 4 opens with this truth because without it, no deeper peace can follow. And as this first movement of the psalm teaches, the night does not belong to fear. It belongs to God. When the soul speaks, he listens. When the heart cries out, he responds in ways that may not always be visible immediately, but are always real. This is the beginning of guarded rest. If this message is helping you find peace and deeper trust in God, subscribe to the channel and continue this journey of spiritual rest and renewal. The night is not only a time of rest, it is a time of exposure. When the world grows quiet, the inner world becomes louder. Psalm 4 recognizes this truth and speaks directly to the inner conflict that rises when external noise disappears. The psalmist turns his attention to the turmoil of the heart, addressing both his own inner state and the condition of those whose hearts are divided. This is where peace is either lost or secured. The battlefield of the night is not outside the body, but within the soul. The psalm speaks to people who lie down with unsettled hearts, whose minds rehearse grievances, whose emotions resist stillness. This unrest is not random, it is the result of unresolved trust. When the heart does not know where to rest, it wanders. When it does not feel safe, it remains alert. Anxiety is often the soul's attempt to protect itself in the absence of trust. Psalm 4 gently but firmly redirects the heart from agitation to reverence. The instruction given is subtle yet powerful. The heart must learn restraint. It must pause before reacting. It must recognize that not every thought deserves agreement, and not every emotion requires action. Nighttime magnifies thoughts, and without discernment, those thoughts can dominate the soul. The psalmist understands that inner peace requires inner discipline. Silence is not enough. The heart must be trained to remain still. This stillness is not suppression. It is alignment. The psalm does not command the heart to stop feeling, but to stop rebelling against God's presence. Many people experience restlessness at night because their hearts are in quiet conflict with reality. They resist what has already happened, fear what has not yet arrived, and replay what cannot be changed. This resistance keeps the soul awake even when the body is exhausted. Psalm 4 introduces a different posture: inward reverence. To be still before God is to acknowledge that He sees what you cannot fix tonight. It is to accept that not everything must be resolved immediately. The heart does not find peace by controlling outcomes, but by releasing them into God's care. This release is not passive resignation, it is active trust. The psalm also confronts the false security people seek. It speaks of those who chase illusions, who trust in empty promises, who measure peace by external gain. These pursuits leave the heart restless because they never address the deeper need for belonging and assurance. When night comes, external success cannot quiet the conscience or calm the spirit. Only truth can do that. Inner turmoil often comes from misaligned desires. The heart wants affirmation, certainty, control, or recognition. When these desires are unmet, agitation follows. Psalm 4 does not condemn desire, but it calls the heart back to what truly satisfies. Peace is not found in abundance, applause, or advantage. It is found in communion with God. The psalmist encourages a form of self-examination that is gentle yet honest. The heart must reflect without accusation. It must observe its own movements without panic. This reflective stillness allows God to speak beneath the noise of fear. Many people avoid silence because they fear what they will hear within themselves. But Psalm 4 reveals that silence, when shared with God, becomes healing rather than threatening. Nighttime restlessness is often fueled by unresolved anger. The psalm acknowledges this and warns against allowing anger to rule the heart. Anger held through the night hardens the spirit. It creates tension in the body and distance in the soul. By releasing anger before sleep, the heart creates space for peace to enter. Forgiveness, even when incomplete, loosens the grip of resentment and restores inner balance. Trust also plays a central role in calming the heart. The psalmist contrasts those who rely on deceptive comforts with those who rest in God's presence. Trust determines where the heart settles when the world goes dark. A heart anchored in God does not need constant reassurance because it has internalized security. This security is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet and steady. Another profound insight from this portion of the psalm is that inner peace is learned, not automatic. The heart must be guided repeatedly toward stillness. This is a spiritual practice, not a personality trait. Even the faithful experience restless nights. What matters is not the absence of struggle, but the direction the heart takes when struggle arises. Psalm 4 invites the heart to shift from reaction to reflection. Instead of replaying conversations, it turns toward prayer. Instead of anticipating disaster, it recalls God's faithfulness. Instead of demanding answers, it rests in God's nearness. This redirection does not happen instantly, but it reshapes the inner landscape over time. The still heart is not an empty heart. It is a heart attentive to God. This attentiveness transforms silence into sanctuary. The night becomes a place where trust deepens rather than fear multiplies. The soul learns that it does not need to resolve everything before sleeping. It only needs to place itself under God's watchful care. When the heart becomes still, the body follows. Breath slows, muscles relax, sleep becomes possible. But more importantly, the soul experiences rest even before sleep arrives. This is the peace Psalm 4 speaks of, not merely physical rest, but spiritual release. The psalm does not promise uninterrupted sleep or problem-free nights. It promises something deeper, guarded rest. The heart that trusts God is not left alone with its fears. God stands watch over the inner life, protecting it from despair and overwhelming anxiety. This divine guardianship allows the soul to release its vigilance. Ultimately, inner peace is not about mastering techniques or controlling thoughts. It is about surrendering authority. The heart finds rest when it no longer sees itself as the final protector of its own future. By yielding to God, it discovers that it was never meant to carry such weight alone. Psalm 4 teaches that the night reveals what the heart truly trusts. When the heart learns to trust God above all else, night loses its power to disturb. Silence becomes safe, darkness becomes gentle, and rest becomes an act of faith rather than exhaustion. This inward transformation does not require perfect understanding. It requires willingness to be still, willingness to release, willingness to trust. As the heart practices this surrender night after night, peace becomes familiar. The soul no longer fears the quiet, it welcomes it. And so the message of Psalm 4 deepens. Peace is not forced upon the heart. It is cultivated through trust, reverence, and surrender. The guarded heart becomes the resting heart. The restless soul learns to be still, not because everything is resolved, but because God is present. If this teaching is guiding you toward deeper peace and helping your heart rest in God's presence, subscribe to the channel and continue walking with us through these psalms of comfort and spiritual renewal. One of the most powerful movements in Psalm 4 is the quiet contrast it draws between outward circumstances and inward assurance. The psalmist acknowledges that many voices around him are asking the same restless question: who will show us good? This question is not merely about prosperity or success. It is the cry of a soul searching for reassurance in a world that feels uncertain. It reveals a deep human longing for stability, meaning, and visible proof that things will be all right. Yet Psalm 4 responds to this longing not with external signs, but with an inward transformation that redefines what goodness truly means. The search for good often becomes frantic at night. During the day, activity creates the illusion of progress. At night, when action pauses, the soul confronts its deeper hunger. Many people equate goodness with favorable outcomes, recognition, or relief from hardship. When these are absent, anxiety rises. Psalm 4 gently dismantles this fragile definition of good by pointing the soul towards something far more stable, the light of God's presence. The psalmist does not deny the desire for good. Instead, he redirects it. He asks God to lift the light of his face upon him. This request carries immense spiritual depth. In ancient understanding, the face of God symbolized favor, attention, and relational closeness. To ask for God's light is to ask for awareness of his nearness. This awareness becomes the soul's true source of peace, replacing the need for constant external validation. What makes this shift so powerful is that it does not depend on changing circumstances. The psalmist's environment may still be unstable. Opposition may still exist, uncertainty may remain, yet the inner experience changes entirely. Peace emerges not because problems vanish, but because perspective is transformed. When the soul becomes aware of God's presence, fear loses its grip. This inner joy is described as greater than material abundance. The psalmist claims that God has put more joy in his heart than those who experience prosperity and success. This statement is radical. It challenges the assumption that joy is the natural result of favorable conditions. Instead, Psalm 4 reveals joy as a spiritual gift rooted in relationship rather than circumstance. This joy is quiet, but it is strong. It does not depend on stimulation. It does not require constant reinforcement. It settles into the soul and creates resilience. Nighttime becomes less threatening because joy is no longer dependent on what the next day might bring. The heart rests because it has already received what it truly needs. The joy described in Psalm 4 is not excitement or emotional high. It is a deep sense of sufficiency. It tells the soul, even in silence, that it is held, seen, and valued. This sufficiency silences the endless comparison that often disturbs rest. The soul no longer measures itself against others or against imagined futures. It rests in what is already given. This inward joy also stabilizes identity. Many sleepless nights are fueled by insecurity. The mind questions worth, direction, and purpose. Psalm 4 counters this by grounding identity in God's regard. When the light of God's face becomes the reference point, the soul no longer needs to seek affirmation elsewhere. Identity becomes anchored, and anchored souls sleep more peacefully. Another profound dimension of this joy is gratitude. The psalmist's heart is not fixated on what is lacking, but on what has been received. Gratitude shifts attention away from scarcity and toward abundance. This shift is crucial for rest. A grateful heart is less vigilant, less defensive, and more open to peace. Joy also acts as a guard against despair. When the soul knows that its joy is rooted in God rather than circumstance, temporary darkness loses its power to convince the heart that hope is gone. The night may still be dark, but it is no longer threatening. The soul trusts that light is not absent, only unseen. Psalm 4 does not present joy as something that must be manufactured through effort. It is received through trust. The psalmist does not command himself to feel joyful. He acknowledges that God has placed joy in his heart. This distinction matters. Many people exhaust themselves trying to feel better. Psalm 4 invites the soul to receive rather than strive. This receiving posture transforms the night. Instead of wrestling with thoughts, the soul rests in awareness. Instead of chasing reassurance, it accepts presence. Instead of fearing the future, it trusts the one who holds it. This trust does not eliminate uncertainty, but it removes its dominance. Joy rooted in God also creates emotional balance. It does not deny sorrow, but it prevents sorrow from overwhelming the soul. The heart becomes spacious enough to hold both pain and peace without collapsing. This emotional maturity is essential for restful sleep. The soul no longer fears its own emotions. The psalmist's joy also carries a communal implication. While others ask who will show us good, he points to God as the ultimate source. This testimony is quiet but powerful. It suggests that peace is available even when the world is restless. The guarded soul becomes a witness, not through argument, but through calm. As the night deepens, this inner joy acts like a steady light. It does not flicker with changing circumstances. It remains present even when thoughts wander. This constancy allows the soul to release control. Sleep becomes possible not because everything is resolved, but because the heart is satisfied. Psalm 4 teaches that peace is not passive. It is sustained by inner alignment. When desire aligns with God's presence rather than external outcomes, the soul finds rest. The night becomes a place of renewal rather than dread. This joy also prepares the soul for trust. Trust grows more easily in a heart that is already content. Anxiety often arises from the fear of loss. When joy is rooted in something unchanging, loss becomes less terrifying. The soul knows that even if circumstances shift, its foundation remains intact. The psalmist's confidence does not come from predicting a better tomorrow, but from experiencing God today. This present-centered trust is deeply calming. The soul no longer races ahead into imagined futures. It rests where it is, under God's light. This is one of the most transformative teachings of Psalm 4. Peace is not postponed until conditions improve. It is available now, in the quiet of the night, through awareness of God's presence. This awareness becomes the soul's anchor. As the heart absorbs this truth, night loses its power to intimidate. Silence becomes welcome, darkness becomes gentle, rest becomes natural. The soul no longer fights the night, it enters it with trust. This inner joy does not make the soul naive, it makes it grounded. The psalmist remains aware of reality, but he refuses to let reality define his peace. God's presence becomes the final authority over his inner life. And so Psalm 4 continues to teach that peace flows from presence, joy flows from trust, and rest flows from surrender. The guarded soul sleeps not because it has solved every problem, but because it knows who watches over it. If this message is bringing peace to your heart and helping you rest more deeply in God's presence, subscribe to the channel and continue this journey through the Psalms of peace, trust, and spiritual renewal. As Psalm 4 moves closer to its conclusion, the focus shifts from the inner state of the heart to the profound reality of divine distinction. The psalmist declares with quiet certainty that the Lord has set apart the godly for himself. This statement is not an expression of pride or spiritual superiority. It is a declaration of belonging. To be set apart by God is not to be removed from hardship, but to be claimed within it. This truth becomes one of the deepest sources of peace available to the human soul, especially in the stillness of the night. Many sleepless nights are rooted in a sense of abandonment. The soul wonders whether it is seen, whether it matters, whether its faithfulness has meaning. Psalm 4 answers these unspoken questions not with explanation, but with affirmation. To be set apart means to be known. It means that God's attention is not generic or distant, but personal and intentional. This awareness reshapes how the soul experiences vulnerability. The idea of being set apart does not imply a life of ease. The psalmist speaks these words while still surrounded by misunderstanding and pressure. What changes is not the environment, but the interpretation of it. When the soul understands that it belongs to God, adversity no longer feels like evidence of rejection. Instead, it becomes part of a larger story of formation and trust. This sense of divine belonging calms the heart because it removes the need for constant validation. Many people lie awake at night replaying conversations, questioning decisions, and wondering how they are perceived. The psalmist's confidence rests elsewhere. His worth is not determined by human approval, but by divine regard. This shift is profoundly liberating. When the soul no longer depends on external affirmation, it can finally rest. Being set apart also implies protection. The psalmist does not claim immunity from pain, but he trusts that God hears him when he calls. This assurance transforms prayer from a desperate attempt to be noticed into a confident expression of relationship. The soul does not cry out into silence, it speaks to a God who listens. This listening presence is crucial for nighttime peace. Night amplifies the fear of being unheard. Problems feel heavier when they echo only within the mind. Psalm 4 counters this isolation by affirming that God is attentive even when the world is quiet. The soul is never speaking into a void. Divine attentiveness also restores dignity. To be heard by God is to be affirmed as significant. This significance does not depend on achievement or status. It flows from relationship. The psalmist's peace is rooted in the knowledge that his life matters to God, even when others misunderstand or dismiss him. Another subtle but powerful element of this section of Psalm 4 is the removal of competition. When the soul knows it is set apart, it no longer needs to compare itself to others. Comparison is one of the greatest thieves of rest. It keeps the mind active, measuring, evaluating, and striving. Divine belonging ends this cycle by grounding identity in something unchanging. This belonging also brings clarity. The soul no longer needs to chase every opportunity or defend every position. It can afford to be still because its purpose is secure. Nighttime becomes less anxious because the future no longer feels entirely uncertain. The soul trusts that it is being guided, even when the path is not fully visible. The psalmist's confidence that God hears him also reshapes how he understands prayer. Prayer becomes less about persuasion and more about alignment. The soul does not need to convince God to care. It rests in the truth that care is already present. This realization allows prayer itself to become restful rather than exhausting. There is also a deep sense of surrender embedded in this declaration. To be set apart is to accept that one's life is not entirely self-directed. This acceptance brings peace because it removes the pressure of total responsibility. The soul no longer believes it must manage every outcome. It trusts that God is actively involved. This trust transforms vulnerability into safety. Night often exposes vulnerability because defenses are lowered. Psalm 4 teaches that vulnerability, when held within divine belonging, is not dangerous. It is sacred. The soul can rest without armor because it is not unprotected. Being set apart also reframes suffering. Instead of interpreting difficulty as punishment or failure, the soul begins to see it as part of a refining process. This does not romanticize pain, but it prevents despair. The soul trusts that nothing it endures is meaningless or unseen. The psalmist's calm confidence also suggests a deep familiarity with God. This familiarity does not come from occasional encounters, but from sustained relationship. Nighttime peace grows over time as trust is practiced repeatedly. Each night becomes an opportunity to reaffirm belonging. Another important dimension of this belonging is freedom from fear of abandonment. Many people struggle to rest because they fear being left alone with their problems. Psalm 4 assures the soul that it is never alone. God's presence does not withdraw when the day ends. It remains steady through the night. This assurance allows the soul to release vigilance. Constant alertness is exhausting. It keeps the nervous system activated and prevents rest. Divine belonging signals to the soul that it is safe enough to relax. God is watching. The soul does not need to. The psalmist's declaration also invites humility. Being set apart is not an achievement, it is a gift. This humility keeps the soul grounded and open. It prevents arrogance and fosters gratitude. A grateful heart rests more easily than a proud one. As night deepens, this sense of being claimed by God becomes a refuge. Thoughts may still arise, emotions may still fluctuate, but beneath it all, there is a steady awareness of being held. This awareness becomes the foundation for true rest. Psalm 4 shows that peace is not merely emotional regulation, it is relational security. The soul rests because it knows to whom it belongs. This knowledge quiets fear, softens tension, and invites sleep. The psalmist's trust that God hears him also prepares the way for the final act of surrender. Having affirmed belonging and attentiveness, the soul is ready to release itself fully into rest. Night is no longer something to endure. It becomes something to enter with confidence. This section of Psalm 4 teaches that divine belonging is not abstract theology. It is practical comfort. It meets the soul in its most vulnerable moments and offers stability. When the heart internalizes this truth, rest becomes possible, even in uncertainty. And so the guarded rest promised by Psalm 4 deepens. The soul does not rest because it is strong, but because it is held. It does not sleep because it has answers, but because it trusts the one who does. If this message is strengthening your sense of belonging in God and helping your soul find deeper rest, subscribe to the channel and continue walking with us through these psalms of peace, trust, and spiritual refuge. Psalm 4 reaches its final movement not with argument, explanation, or dramatic resolution, but with surrender. After addressing distress, calming the heart, receiving inner joy, and affirming divine belonging, the psalmist arrives at a place of complete trust. He declares that he will lie down and sleep in peace because the Lord alone makes him dwell in safety. This closing statement is not poetic exaggeration. It is a spiritual conclusion reached through lived experience. It reveals the ultimate destination of faith: rest. Sleep is one of the most vulnerable human acts. When we sleep, we relinquish control. We cannot monitor threats, solve problems, or manage outcomes. For many, this vulnerability produces fear rather than peace. Night becomes a reminder of human limitation. Psalm 4 directly addresses this fear by redefining safety. Safety is not created by awareness, preparation, or vigilance. Safety is granted by God. The psalmist does not say he sleeps because everything around him is secure. He sleeps because God is. This distinction is essential. External conditions may remain uncertain, but internal security is established. Peace becomes possible not because danger is absent, but because trust is present. The phrase, "the Lord alone," carries profound meaning. It strips away all secondary sources of security. The psalmist does not attribute his peace to wealth, strength, allies, or circumstances. He rests solely in God. This exclusivity is what gives the rest its depth. Divided trust produces divided rest. Undivided trust produces peace. Many restless nights are the result of misplaced trust. The soul tries to secure itself through planning, control, or anticipation. When these fail, anxiety follows. Psalm 4 invites the soul to release these false supports. It teaches that rest is not earned through effort, but received through surrender. This surrender is not passive resignation, it is active confidence. The psalmist chooses to lie down. He does not collapse from exhaustion. He enters rest intentionally. This choice reflects faith. It is a declaration that God is capable of guarding what the soul cannot. The act of lying down also symbolizes humility. It acknowledges human limitation. Pride resists rest because it fears dependence. Faith embraces rest because it trusts God's care. Psalm 4 shows that humility is not weakness, it is the doorway to peace. The sleep described here is not merely physical, it is holistic rest. It includes the mind, the emotions, and the spirit. The psalmist's peace is complete because his trust is complete. He has brought every concern into God's presence and released it there. Safety, as defined by Psalm 4, is not the absence of threat, but the presence of God's guardianship. The psalmist does not claim immunity from harm. He claims assurance of care. This assurance allows the soul to release fear without denying reality. The night often magnifies fear because the unknown feels closer. Darkness removes visual certainty. Psalm 4 counters this by shifting the source of certainty from sight to trust. The soul does not need to see to rest. It needs to believe. This belief does not come from denial. It comes from relationship. The psalmist has walked with God through distress, prayer, reflection, joy, and belonging. Rest is the natural outcome of this journey. It is not imposed at the beginning. It emerges at the end. The phrase, "dwell in safety," suggests continuity. This is not a momentary peace. It is an ongoing state. The soul does not merely visit safety, it inhabits it. This dwelling implies familiarity and permanence. Night after night, the soul returns to the same refuge. This consistency is vital for spiritual health. Chronic restlessness wears down the soul. It creates fatigue that no amount of sleep can heal. Psalm 4 offers a different rhythm. Trust leads to rest. Rest restores strength. Strength deepens trust. The psalmist's final declaration also carries prophetic power. By speaking peace, he reinforces it. Faith is often strengthened through confession. Declaring trust aligns the soul with truth. The words spoken before sleep shape the quality of rest. There is also courage in this declaration. Choosing peace in a troubled world is an act of resistance against fear. It refuses to let anxiety dictate the inner life. Psalm 4 empowers the soul to choose trust, even when circumstances remain unresolved. The simplicity of the psalm's ending is striking. After addressing deep emotional and spiritual realities, it resolves not in complexity, but in rest. This simplicity reflects divine wisdom. The soul does not need complicated answers to sleep. It needs assurance. This assurance is rooted in God's character. God is not portrayed as distant or unpredictable. He is a guardian. He watches while the soul sleeps. This image reverses the usual human dynamic. Instead of humans watching over themselves, God watches over them. This reversal is transformative. It allows the soul to relinquish its self-appointed role as protector. It restores the proper order of trust. God guards, the soul rests. This order brings peace. Psalm 4 does not promise that every night will be easy. It promises that every night can be entrusted to God. Even when sleep is interrupted, peace remains available. The soul can return to rest repeatedly because safety is not fragile. The psalmist's peace is not escapism. It does not ignore reality. It faces reality with faith. This faith does not eliminate struggle, but it prevents struggle from consuming the soul. As the psalm closes, the reader is left with a model for living and resting. Bring distress to God, calm the heart, receive joy from His presence, remember divine belonging, then surrender fully into rest. This rhythm transforms not only nights, but lives. Psalm 4 teaches that peace is not found by fighting the night, but by trusting God within it. The soul does not conquer fear through effort, but through faith. Rest becomes an act of worship. In a restless world, this message is radical. It invites the soul to stop striving and start trusting. It declares that God's guardianship is sufficient. The night does not need to be feared. It can be embraced as a space of renewal. The final gift of Psalm 4 is this assurance: you are safe enough to sleep, not because life is predictable, but because God is faithful. This faithfulness does not sleep, it watches while you rest. And so the psalm ends where the soul longs to be, at peace, lying down, letting go, dwelling in safety, guarded by God. If this journey through Psalm 4 has brought peace to your heart and helped you trust God with your nights, subscribe to the channel and continue with us as we explore the scriptures that restore rest, strengthen faith, and quiet the soul.